X-Men. X-Men. So I got to see X-Men Days of Future Past a few days ago, and I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how to review this movie, largely because just on its own, I don't think I liked it very much. Days of Future Past on its own makes sense. There's a plot that functions like a plot. It makes sense from A to B. It's a little exposition heavy up front, but to be fair, they have a lot to explain anyway. For a movie about time travel, it is remarkably straightforward, and there are a few differences between the film and the original comics, but ultimately those don't matter. Thematically, it covers all the same ground that we've seen before in every one of the X-Men movies. The opening sequence even kind of echoes the opening sequence of the first X-Men movie and then X-Men First Class that took place in the concentration camp. Some of the imagery is very much the same. Meanwhile, Xavier and Magneto are still coming to terms about which side of this conflict they're going to be on. There's a whole lot of, "They're going to kill us, Charles," and a lot of, "No, I still have hope, Eric." We've more than established that with every other X-Men movie, and there was even a whole movie dedicated to the whole origins of that conflict with X-Men First Class. Going into this movie, I was really hoping for more of Xavier and Magneto working together. I love the idea that they're dear friends in the future, and going into the past and their younger, more spirited selves, more idealistic selves have to join forces to save the future from the past. I love that idea. But all we got is more of them at odds. There's a lot of like Magneto going along with the plan and then going totally off book at the last minute, the same way that he did in X-Men First Class. I was also really disappointed in Hugh Jackman, and that's the first time I have ever said that. For a guy being sent back to save the world, there is absolutely no urgency with Wolverine once he gets back to 1973. Now, obviously, I don't want him running around panicking the whole time, but really all he does is just kind of crack wise. And don't get me wrong, you need that with your Wolverine. You need the wisecracking. But he was just so calm about the whole thing. The scenes in the future are painted so bleakly and so violently. These Sentinels are like ripping mutants in half and burning their faces off. And then you go back into the past and it's all these like wink and a nod type jokes where Wolverine is walking through a metal detector expecting it to go off, but it doesn't, because then he realizes that, oh, I don't have my metal skeleton yet. It just kind of felt like Bryan Singer and Hugh Jackman got together and said, look, this is old man Logan in young man Logan's body, so I'm just going to be an old man and kind of bothered by the fact that I'm having to do this the whole time. So the urgency, or lack of urgency, that he dealt with his mission in the past didn't match how violent and desolate and desperate the situation was in the future. And then there's Quicksilver. Quicksilver was actually my favorite part of the whole movie. For as much crap as he got, for like how silly he looked in all the promo images, he really fit excellently within the context of the movie. He's just this punk kid in the 70s, and he's funny for the entire section of the movie that he's in, but then they just get rid of him. Like, he helps them break Magneto out of the Pentagon, and then they're like, thanks, kid, see you later. It really felt like the way that they dealt with Gambit in X-Men Origins Wolverine. The difference is, X-Men Origins Wolverine and Gambit within that movie, Quicksilver was awesome, and Days of Future Past wasn't so so it didn't bump me quite as much, but it did have that feel of like shoehorning another mutant into the middle of the story. It was very episodic. So again, I guess on its own, this movie wasn't really that interesting. What's interesting is what the movie does with the entire X-Men universe that Fox is building. Now, I know that with every sequel that's ever been made, and with every entry into all these new cinematic universes, there's a certain amount of required viewing. Like, if you haven't seen all the other Marvel movies, you might not enjoy the Avengers that much, but The Avengers is still a good movie and it stands on its own 2 feet, more so than Days of Future Past did. Where Days of Future Past failed is that you have to see all of the other X-Men movies to really get what's going on. For example, there's a scene where Wolverine runs into a young William Stryker and he just absolutely loses his shit. Now, all we get is the name William Stryker and a couple of really quick clips of like Brian Cox playing William Stryker in X2, and then some of that green bubbly adamantium grafting procedure scene that they used in a bunch of the different movies. So the uninitiated would really have no idea why Wolverine is freaking out, just that he's having some sort of weird mental breakdown because of this dude. So the really interesting thing about Days of Future Past is that it's asking more of the average moviegoer than we ever have before. It's asking moviegoers to watch movies the way comic book readers read comic books. I'm gonna try my best to dance around a few spoilers here because I don't want to give too much away, but if you're really spoiler phobic, you might want to come back and finish this video a little bit later. So X-Men Days of Future Past, and it might not be much of a surprise anyway, is just a giant reset button. All the old X-Men movies, it's like they never happened, except for X-Men First Class, because that took place in the 60s, and this movie takes place in 1973, and that's where the timeline split. The rest of it, all the X1, X2, X3, The Wolverine, X-Men Origins Wolverine, thank God, we can all just forget about that one. So while Days of Future Past assumed that we as viewers have seen all of these other X-Men movies, at the same time, it made that required viewing completely moot. And that was part of what was so frustrating about this movie not being a good movie just standing alone by itself. It was so clearly serving a different master, having to sort of reorganize all the canon that Fox has established over the years. Now the cool part is, this is what comic books do all the time. They retcon, they pick and choose parts of the history that they want to continue with, they reorganize the canon, they bring characters back from the dead for like nothing. And Marvel is doing the same thing. Like, all of their Netflix properties are in the same universe as their tentpole films. But I think with how much retcon Days of Future Past did, I think we can officially say that these giant movie franchises are officially comic books. And to be fair, with this movie, Fox has done a much better job than Sony has with the Spider-Man movies or the Warner Brother has with all their DC properties. Days of Future Past was kind of genius in that way. And they are showing a little restraint by not immediately forcing the Fan 4 universe that they're about to reboot into the X-Men franchise as well. That I actually think is a good idea. Ultimately though, I think we can all get behind the idea that these movies are becoming comic books, that watching these movies is going to be the same experience as being a fan of Marvel or of DC. But the cost of that is going to be occasionally having to suffer through a movie like X-Men Days of Future Past, where the main goal of the whole thing is not story, it's not character, it's just retroactive continuity. So let me know what you think about all that. Go check out the movie this weekend, come back, let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. Make sure to click like and subscribe, and as always, come back next time for more movie news on CineFix Now. Oh, and there's a crazy post-credit sequence about the pyramids. It's very Thanos. Oh, I talk like that now, don't I?